Good morning. Welcome to the Lewis Reed for Mayor of St. Louis virtual town hall for unions and trades, part 2. We have to thank the close to 1,000 viewers that watched this past Wednesday's town hall. Thank you so much. Now, let's learn more about our moderator for this morning's event. Born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, Dave went from being an in-store shop steward to a volunteer organizer to a full-time union representative in 1987. In 2004, he was elected as secretary-treasurer and is currently serving his 4th term as president of UFCW Local 655. In 2017, he was elected to the UFCW International Executive Board. David has made presentations on labor issues across the United States, Canada, and Japan. He serves on numerous boards and is director and serves as president of Preserve Middle Class America, which helped lead the fight to defeat right to work in Missouri in 2018. Let me present to some and introduce to others. David A. Cook, President, UFCW Local 655.
Thank you, Keith. So I have the honor to once again moderate a town hall forum for our union brothers and sisters across the St. Louis area for the president of the Board of Aldermen and candidate for mayor, the next mayor of the city of St. Louis, and a friend of mine, Lewis Reed. So this, in my position as a union leader, I get approached by a lot of politicians that want our endorsement. This was one of the simplest decisions I've had to make. I've known Lewis now for a long time. I hate to date ourselves here, but Lewis does what you want out of a politician. He tells you the way it is. You don't always like what he says, although if you're a union person, more times than not, you do because he's on our side. But the ultimate reason I landed on endorsing Lewis Reed is because when Lewis gives you his word, Lewis lives up to it. I want to tell you a little story, and for those that were joined us on Wednesday, I apologize, you're going to hear this again, but back in 2017, the city of St. Louis, myself and a lot of other people were pushing to have them raise the minimum wage. Now, there is a pretty big outreach of city leaders that were opposed to this. I was part of a group that was in favor of this. I would never forget that I was talking to Lewis Reed. It was 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, the night before the vote. And we were having a very heated conversation, just venting all sides of this. And I finally, at the end of the conversation, said, Lewis, I need to know where you're at on this. Can I count on your vote? And his words to me were, Dave, you have convinced me. I am there. I'm not moving. You're going to get this bill. We're going to get this bill passed. I had a meeting with a lot of labor leaders the next morning that were pushing for the minimum wage. And to a T, each and every one of them told me, this bill is not going to pass. Lewis is going to jump backwards. And I still remember saying, it's done. It's over. Lewis, through all the political pressure from everybody, never bowed, never backed down, never wavered, and pushed that minimum wage bill through. Why? Because A, he thought it was the right thing to do, and B, and this is the most important part in my mind, because he made a commitment. And when you make a commitment, you live up to that commitment. And with that, that's the type of person we need leading the city of St. Louis, that they weigh all sides, they make a decision, they make a commitment, and they live up to that. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce my friend and the next mayor of St. Louis, Lewis Reed.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate that. And for the viewers who have not had an opportunity to meet Dave and see the way he operates, I call him Dave Straight Talk Express Cook for a reason. Because Dave doesn't pull any punches. But if you want to move an entrance system, and if you want to move people to a better place, you have to have that kind of fire and ability to do it. So Dave, I appreciate you. You know, like a little known fact that when we were looking at that minimum wage deal, not every organized labor body was on the same page on that, because some of them felt that there were bigger priorities and different priorities, and that may cause them from moving other things, right? and they were worried about the state overturning it and all that stuff. And the one that brought in the most clarity was Dave Cook. And it was at exactly the right time. And I'm not gonna say everything that was said on the call, but but Dave made it crystal clear where everybody had to be. And what that also told me is that the reason some of the other organized labor bodies began to align all in the right places, because we had somebody like Dave Cook in the middle, bringing everybody together. Like Dave, I've told you in the past, and some of the listeners may have, and people who are viewing this may have heard some of my background in the past, right? I grew up one of 9 kids. My mother was a cook and my father was a mechanic. He later became a welder for Caterpillar Tractor. We were not a politically connected family at all whatsoever. My parents taught us to use our voices and to stand for those things that were right and just. Growing up, Dave, and I'm sure you've experienced this, my parents have sometimes struggled to pay rent and utilities, but amidst all those struggles, some days without electric to light our home and gas to heat it, my mama, she assured us without ever saying a word that things are going to be okay and those days are going to pass. They taught us to respect the opinions of others and to own our failures even more so than our successes. And that was really, really important, especially growing up in a household that provided the things that we had because of organized labor. And I think about those things, and I often draw on those lessons that were instilled in me as a child. And those lessons, led me to pass legislation and innovative programs that have impacted the people of the city of St. Louis in a major way. The creation of thousands of jobs, expanded youth programs and services, full accreditation of our St. Louis City public schools, removal of illegal guns off our streets, greatly expanded senior services, increased small business resources, adoption of a local and a regional sustainability plan, investing in our neighborhoods, a law mandating minority and women-owned business inclusion, workforce development, millions of dollars in COVID relief funding. And this doesn't sum up my total body of work, right? But what it should give people is a flavor of the types of things that I work on. And it's due to my upbringing and due to my connections with organized labor. Dave, when you think about what organized labor does, right? My father used to tell us this all the time. He goes, look, 40-hour work week, you need to thank organized labor for that, right? Because, equal pay, you need to thank organized labor for the gains that have been made for that. Family and Medical Leave Act, you need to thank organized labor. Paid vacation, you need to thank organized labor. So whether you are an organized labor person or not, right? If you are a salaried person, everyone in the workplace today that has a job, they have some thanks to organized labor for the some of the benefits that they take for granted every day. So I thank you for that. But as organized labor leaders like you that haven't compromised on those important things that led us here.
Thanks, Louis. So let me go through kind of what the agenda here is. We've received a lot of questions. Some of these are going to be repeats and some are going to be new from Wednesday's venue. If you have a question that you'd like answered, you can do one of two things. You can email us at readforstlouis@gmail.com. Again, that's readforstlouis@gmail.com. You can also message in the Facebook comments, and we have a couple of people back in the studio that are watching this, and they'll be feeding us those as they can today. But I have a couple of questions that I want to get to right away, Louis. But before I do that, I want to just alter from where we were the other day. I heard you tell your story on Wednesday and again today about some of the tough times, and I don't know if it was today or Wednesday, you were talking about when your father was on strike and you might not have had electric and all that, and you never even worked. Your father never varied from his belief in the union movement. I didn't share this story with you, but when you told that on Wednesday evening, it reminded me, my father was the most respectful guy in the world, never raised his voice to my mother, maybe one or two times in my entire lifetime. He was just that type of person.
Yeah.
Very intimidating,
Yeah.
but never to my mother. I remember one of the few times in his entire life he ever raised his voice to my mother, and it was when Sears was on strike. We lived out in the rural area, Baldwin, and she said to my father when he came home from work, I almost went into such and such, I think it was Sears, because I was going to pick up whatever. And he said, Susan, don't they have a picket line in front of them? She said, yes. Now she didn't cross, and I still remember to this day how animated he got, that
Yeah.
you never, no matter what is going on in life, cross a picket line.
Yeah.
Those are workers that are struggling for a better life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that it was just that there's a picket line. He went into the details as to why.
Yeah.
You don't. And when you told that story the other day, it's like, wow, there's just a similarity in the way I think we were brought up and the beliefs that we shared growing up.
Which is probably why we're both wrestlers.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's those little things that begin to shape your character at a very young age, and it's important because look, when people see a picket line, and whether you're part of that organized body or not, organized labor body or not, their success is your success, and their failure is your failure, right? So you really need them to succeed, because it's a ripple effect across all industries when they succeed.
Yep, I agree. So let me kind of open this up. As I said in my opening, there's an unbelievable bond between Lewis Reed and myself, mutual respect. I can go down a litany of things that Lewis Reed has done for myself, for organized laborers, and for workers as a whole. But what I'd like you to do, Lewis, is take a couple minutes, because I know all of this about you. But there's a lot of people out there that are watching today or going to watch this later. They don't know everything you've done for labor in St. Louis like I do. Now, I told them the minimum wage story, but there's a whole lot of workers that are listening to you today that would not have had some hours on projects in St. Louis had it not been for you. So why don't you talk just a little bit about, and don't take the whole hour, but talk a little bit about what you've done for labor and creating jobs.
Well, thanks, Dave. I look at some of the projects that weren't popular when they came around. I look at Scott Trade Center, right? A whole bunch of people lined up against Scott Trade Center, including one person that's actually running in this race for mayor, right? One person that's running in this race for mayor was so angry about us redeveloping Scott Trade Center that she actually sued the city and sued the Blues hockey team because of the renovation. Now, the city owns the building, and I had to carry that bill during the last mayoral election. So every debate I showed up at, people were like, oh, you're the guy that's trying to renovate Scott Trade Center. But what they didn't know is that the building was way out of date. It's owned by the city of St. Louis. Little investment had been made in it across 20 plus years. And there were events that we were not going to get unless we made renovations. So we renovated it, right? Now, while some of my opponents were saying the Blues hockey team needs to move to Kansas City, I said, no, we're going to retain them here in the city of St. Louis, and we're going to do the right thing. We're going to renovate our own property. We did that. What happened? We ended up winning the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely.
Although the renovation didn't make them win the Stanley Cup, they were going to win this game because they were a hell of a team, and the ownership group did the right thing, right? But at least we made it so that they could win it here in the city of St. Louis, right? They won the Stanley Cup, right? And we had the All-Star, then the All-Star game, right? The way we're going to keep NCAA coming back to St. Louis and all the economic dollars swirling around that is through that investment. That created jobs for people, right? NFL, when we had to put a proposal in for the NFL, right, to be able to try to keep the football team, right? Now, that is a very controversial issue. But one of the things we knew is that if we did not position St. Louis so that we at least put a proposal in, we would have lost the ability to pursue any legal action in the future and to protect the people who had bought the seats, right? So we put a proposal in. Organized labor was heavy behind that. Both of my opponents that are in this race fought against it, protested in front of City Hall against it and everything else. Well, thankfully we did do that, because now all those people who bought those PSLs, they now have had standing, and they've been able to recoup their funding. The city now is in a greater position moving forward. Soccer stadium, MLS.
Yeah.
I picked that thing up, and when I picked it up, everybody that's running against me right now in this race, all against the thing, and we had to fight to give position the city so that the ownership group could put a proposal in, so that we could eventually come back past the final bills and have the MLS stadium being built. And now there are thousands of jobs that are being created from those things. Ballpark Village Phase 1, Phase 2, again, people fighting against it, but again, employment for organized labor bodies, right? Employment for people who live in and around St. Louis. All of the ancillary shops and other economic activity that spurred off of those things, hotel rooms being booked, right? Restaurants having people in them, right? None of those things happen without economic activity happening downtown. So that's really important, and a lot of people rely on that.
Absolutely. And I want to just bring up two things and highlight that you talked about, and I did this the other day, but once again, I want you to, maybe a couple of things. I want everybody to understand that Lewis is absolutely right. The Blues would have won the Stanley Cup with or without the renovation. But quite honestly, I don't know if everybody realizes there's a good chance that had that not gone through, they would have won the cup in a different city.
Yes.
Because that was a true threat for them to leave.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing we can do. And if you're like me, I love our St. Louis sports teams. I love them all. When the football Rams were here, I loved them. When the St. Louis Rams were here, I loved them. Very disappointed that the NFL has left us. And it makes my heart a little warm when I know that Stan Kroenke was given depositions the other day over the lawsuit that the city of St. Louis has brought. And the reason he's given depositions is because it's a real viable lawsuit that was only there. And Lewis mentioned this. I just want to highlight it. That lawsuit is only there and viable because there was a viable proposal put forward that was opposed by so many, but pushed by Lewis. And I want to highlight this soccer stadium that everybody in the world seemed to be against, except for Lewis. There's going to be jobs created for that stadium and that area around there. But ladies and gentlemen, soccer is one of the sports of the future in America. And this was a coup to get a team in St. Louis. This was a big deal for St. Louis. Would not have happened without Lewis. So Lewis, thanks for kind of talking about what you've done in the past. And there's a longer list than what we talked about today. But why don't you talk a little bit about what you see in the future for economic development and quality union jobs in the city when you're elected as mayor?
Well, Dave, last year I actually 2 years ago, I put in a board bill that required the city of St. Louis to create an equitable economic development strategic framework. And the reason I did that is because of two reasons. First reason is that the rating agencies, when they rate the city of St. Louis, when they give us a credit rating, they need to know that we have a framework in place that we are going to be able to diversify our revenue streams coming in the city of St. Louis, that we have a framework in place to provide economic prosperity for the people who live here and stimulate our job base and attract new businesses and new opportunities to the city of St. Louis. So that equitable economic development strategic framework is very key to the future of St. Louis. Now, it took about 18 months for the city to get through it. They had thousands of people that volunteered hours and everything to it. You know, a lot of community meetings throughout the community, a lot of input from experts across the country. And it is a great framework, and it takes into account other underlining frameworks or plans that exist throughout the city, right? So some of the 4 key things that the framework will do: it's going to increase the city's population by 30,000 people by 2030, right? It also calls for exceeding the national growth rate in jobs and payroll amongst all of our key industries. It's also causes for closing the existing opportunity, employment, wage, entrepreneurship, wealth gaps amongst people of color and people who live within the city of St. Louis, so that people have more equal opportunity and we lift everybody up. And then we want to achieve a sustainable long-term tax revenue growth in the city, right? So that kind of gives you the framework of what we're doing with that economic development strategy. You know, when you think about you know, how we're gonna do these things. So there are 10 key ways or key things that we are going to do, or principles we're going to follow. I talked to you about achieve annual growth in employment and payroll amongst all of our key industries, reduce St. Louis's poverty rate across all racial, ethnic groups, close unemployment wage gaps between African Americans and their white counterparts. And this is really important because when you look at some of the crime that we have in our city, and particularly the fact that, you know, a lot of the murders that's happening in our city, it's a lot of African American males that are on both sides of that, right? So the question is why, all right? So when you look at the unemployment in the city of St. Louis, when the unemployment in the city of St. Louis is around 5 or 6%, the unemployment for young African-American males are 20% and above, which is why I really appreciate your organized body, Dave, because you guys do a good job of reaching out and connecting people to good, high-paying jobs. But once you get them into that job, you turn it into a career because you allow them to progress and you lay the groundwork with the employer and hold the employer accountable so that the people that are in that new job that becomes a career, they have a ladder to success and they have payroll increase, they have wage increases along the way, and they can provide for their family, like you say, with one good job. But the other things are reduce vacancy rates and promote vibrancy amongst our commercial corridors, especially underserved neighborhoods, promote anti-displacement and increasing homes and business ownership opportunities for people of color and people who have been underrepresented in terms of population in the city. And then we want to reverse the decline, right? And that's a huge thing when you think about the decline in our households and school-age kids that are leaving the city of St. Louis. And, you know, strengthen the city's financial outlook. But one of the things that we're going to have to do is work with the employers so that they will adopt and commit to adopting workplace policies that diversify the workplace, increase worker retention, and provide access to wraparound services so that at least half of all job holders in the city of St. Louis work for employees that have committed to such policies. You know, those things will begin to, you know, help strengthen the workforce in the city of St. Louis and begin to set the city of St. Louis among, you know, on the road to some greater prosperity.
Well, you covered a lot there, and there's a lot of things that I think we'd like to delve into a little bit more as we continue on.
And I'll tell you, Dave, I'll stop there because you know, that report is a 450 page report. So, you know, it's important for people to get out there and look at that framework, right?
Yeah.
And whoever's the next mayor of the city of St. Louis, I pray that it's me. They must commit to that framework because that gets us there.
Yep, I agree. And a lot of those topics you touched on, I want to get back into a little bit more in the weeds a little bit later, as time allows here today. But I want to switch subjects a little bit. And part of the problem and you said this the other day, is we have two deadly issues going on in the city of St. Louis. One of them is crime, and I want to get back to that in a couple minutes. But the other one is COVID.
Yeah.
And truly, we have not had great leadership from a national level. Now that seems to be changing. But statewide, we once again are the 50th out of 50 states in getting people vaccinated. So what are you going to do as a mayor of St. Louis to, if elected, to make sure we're actually getting vaccines in people's arms? Because they don't do any good to manufacture the vaccines if they're not being distributed. And once again, as I said, the state of Missouri is the last in the nation, and that's a freaking embarrassment. But what can you do to change that trend in St. Louis City?
Dave, as you know, if you don't get out there and you don't fight for it and you're not fighting every day for it, you're going to be left behind. So first thing is we got to we can't be spectators. So we got to get out of the bleachers and we have to get into the ring and get on the field and fight for the people of the city of St. Louis. What that means is that we need to build partnerships and coordinate with those partnerships in DC so that we can assure that we then are top of the heap. You know, Dave, a few years ago, I worked with National League of Cities, and we built a network of heads of legislative councils across the country, right? So that now we coordinate on big picture issues like environmental sustainability issues and things of that nature. So to take that to another level, we know that there are other like cities across the country, right? And like cities just like St. Louis in the same state, right? Where maybe the head of the state isn't pushing and isn't, you know, working in the right direction to assure that that state gets everything that it needs. But you can short circuit that because you still have senators and Congress people, right? And if you coordinate between those senators and Congress people and act as the glue to bring them together to sing the same tune, you can influence what's happening in DC, especially if you have organized labor bodies with you, right? So we have to use all of our partnerships to deliver greater prosperity in our city, whether we're talking about COVID-19, whether we're talking about funding for transportation, homelessness, all those things. But the other thing is we have to understand the population that we have to serve in the city, right? And the thing that I worry about most is the same population that didn't have access to masks and gloves and all the PPE equipment, right? Is that same population that will be last in line and almost forgot about when it comes to being vaccinated. So we have to take away some of those barriers to entry, transportation, right? So we're gonna have to assure that these locations where you get vaccinated are dispersed throughout the city of St. Louis, where there's easy access to them. The other barrier to entry is people having to go online and sign up. Some people don't have internet. Some people have never used the internet, right? People having to call in first and understand and find the number to be able to do that. There's a massive information gap that we're going to have to fill, right? But also put in plans so that people could just show up and get those vaccinations, you know, at will, right? With very little paperwork to deal with to do it. But all of that starts with first getting the right amount of vaccinations local. And, and to do that, we're going to have to use every available resource and fight for them to get them here.
Great, thank you. You mentioned this earlier, and I talked about it just a minute ago, that the other major killer in St. Louis is crime.
Oh, absolutely.
you're the only candidate I've heard that actually has taken as strong a position, understanding that no matter what you do with passing legislation to build a stadium or do whatever else, if you're not successful, if this city is not successful with getting crime under control, it's not going to grow. And there's going to continue to be an exodus of population, and the city is not sustainable without people living in it. So what is your thoughts on how to address the crime in the city of St. Louis?
First, Dave, I think it's really important for people to understand that the crime, addressing the issues of crime in the city of St. Louis is a complex issue, right? And it's not just policing. It's policing, it's access to resources, it's wraparound services in the community, it's employment for those economically depressed communities that you see a higher rash of crime happening in, right? And a host of other things like that. So some of the things that we've done already that I've done as a legislator, right, to lay the groundwork for this, right? Because as a legislator, you can legislate, you can put laws in place and that kind of stuff, but truly to carry them out and to implement them the way they need to be implemented, you need to be the mayor, because the mayor is the chief executive officer with every single resource. Police department, none of these departments report to the president of the board, not one, right? We always joke, because as president of the board of Aldermen, I don't have the power to, sign myself up for a magazine subscription in City Hall. Right? We have $0 at the board, right? The money is someplace else. The framers were smart when they did that. They're like, we'll give you guys some power in that legislative branch, but we're not going to give you a dime to do anything with. So we have to leverage our roles to get anything. So here's the thing. Here's what I've done already. I've created Cure Violence. Cure Violence is a program that allows you to get out in front of the public safety issue. It provides resources to the end users, the people within the community that are in that pipeline that may end up in a life of crime, or in families or in households where that kind of crime, these kind of things are taking place because of brothers and sisters and other people, aunts and uncles, people who may be in that life of crime. So Cure Violence people, that they go out and they take people on as clients, and they talk to them each and every day, and they work with them and get the resources they need. They get them back in high school, they get their GEDs, and they get them in good paying jobs, right? Now, data has shown households have become stabilized all across the country because of Cure Violence, right? More people going on getting their GED because of Cure Violence that's working in the community, right? More people getting jobs that are turning into careers because of Cure Violence. So that takes care of some of the socioeconomic stuff, but not all of it. Then I passed a law that requires a public safety plan, a data-driven public safety plan, be put in place by the city of St. Louis. So that will help to address, our policing, right? And how we commit resources across the city of St. Louis to address public safety directly. So it's important that it's data-driven and it's a comprehensive plan. So now the city is going to be required to do that, right? I've worked to put in place other things like, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so that now families get money for rental assistance, mortgage assistance, after-school program, right? Utility assistance, all those things. We now have those things in place to help stabilize some of these households across the city of St. Louis. Put in place body cameras. Why were body cameras important? Body cameras were important because we have to heal our community and we have to bring people back together. So right now, we have a mass division between law enforcement and communities of color, not just in St. Louis, but all across the country. Yep. What can you begin to do to change that dynamic, right? You obviously need better training on police, more up-to-date training on law enforcement side, right? But body cameras help, because when a body camera is present, both sides, it becomes the engagement becomes a more productive engagement and not so volatile, because both parties understand that there's a camera present. Does it cure all of it? No, it doesn't. But now at least you have a record of what happened, right? And it does lower that some. The other thing, in the city of St. Louis, we have 6 massive districts across the city. So if you're law enforcement, right, and people are like, well, I don't trust them because I don't know them. Of course you don't know them. You know why you don't know them? Because we have massive districts, and an officer has to zip from one end of the city to the other end of the city in these massive districts, right? And that officer never gets to know the people that they are patrolling, right? So if we move to smaller districts, and if we if we put policies in place where we absolutely, it is a major thing when we actually transfer an officer from one district to another district, right? But they stay in that district. And the reason that's important is because they have to build a relationship with the people that they're patrolling. That's going to help both sides, right? That's going to help everybody. And that's going to begin to heal the divide. We need more officers in our high schools, right? So that our high schools and middle schoolers, they get to know the police officers get to know them, right? As people, right? So it's all of those kind of things. And we're going to run out of time if I go through all of it. But that's why I say public safety is a very complex and nuanced thing. I know one thing that isn't going to help the city of St. Louis, their economic development strategy or anything like that, and that's legalizing prostitution. So, you know, and I bring that up because, you know, we have other opponents that are saying we need to legalize prostitution, and that is one of the should be one of our priorities. We have a lot of priorities in the city of St. Louis. Legalizing prostitution in one. I mean, we buried over 200 people last year. You know, almost that the year before, right? From violent crimes happening in our city. First thing, our number one priority has to be public safety, addressing our schools and the income gaps that exist throughout the city of St. Louis, building our economy. Post-COVID, we have to plug the big hole in our budget, and so on and so forth.
And Louis, the other night you mentioned, and I didn't catch it this time, that how important prosecuting criminals that are killing each other is in your agenda, because you had the numbers the other evening. I don't know if you call them right now, but how many unsolved murders there are, and those are criminals that in your mind have no right to ever walk the streets of St. Louis because they've taken a life. If you
absolutely. I mean, Dave, think about this. This 7-year-old girl and her father that were just shot dead in cold blood just the past week, right? That girl had just, think about it, she had just finished baking with her grandmother, right? She wanted to grow up and start a baking business. She was a straight A student. Her life is now taken. Her father's life is taken. And on an average year, we only solve and close 30% of the murder cases in the city of St. Louis. So you're more likely to get your car booted and towed for expired tags or unpaid parking tickets than you are if you shoot somebody and murder somebody in the city of St. Louis. That's outrageous. It's outrageous. And no way should that ever be tolerated in the city, right? So the way I look at this, like I said, we right now, the reward for the capture of the person that committed that murder, we're up to $40,000 now. We're making a call this week to our corporate community to get that fund up to $100,000. We need the person who committed that murder to be safe nowhere, so that they don't trust their mother, they don't trust their father, they don't trust one friend around them.
Yep.
Because they know, guess what? I committed that murder. I'm going to have to serve some time. I'm going to have to pay for my wrongdoings. We're taking these shooters off the streets, and we have to have zero tolerance for that. I'm talking to you now as a father of 4,
yep,
not as a president of the board of aldermen. Forget about candidate for mayor or anything like this. This is a parent. I'm a parent talking to you because I worry about my kids each and every day. I had to sit by my brother's hospital bed as he passed away from being shot in the head. You know, my nephew shot and killed in the city of St. Louis. So this stuff is real. And if we do not stop it, it can and will be visited on. People need to understand it can be visited on their family if we allow these statistics to continue to grow unchecked. So these folks have to come off the streets. They're coming off the streets. And, absolute zero tolerance for it.
Thank you. And you're the one candidate that has, in my opinion, taken such a strong position on that. And I think it's vital to the success of St. Louis. We can't succeed if we continue repeating ourselves and not prosecuting these people. Let's talk about schools. And all of these things tie together as you start thinking about it. But schools in the city of St. Louis, what's your thoughts? What's your plans? What do you think the future is there?
Well, first, in plotting and planning and charting our future, we have to understand the past and exactly where we are right now, right? All right, here's the past. In between 1950 and 1960, St. Louis City Public Schools had 110,000 kids in it, right? So the system was built to house 110 to 120,000 kids. That's the size of our system in the city. But at the same time, we had 856,000 people in the city of St. Louis. So we're 856,000 people in the city, 110,000 kids in our school system, right? Brown versus the Board of Education requiring desegregation of our school systems hit in 1955. And the interstate highway system was built out right about that same time. So what happened in the city? Brown versus Board of Education, interstate highway system being built out. Across the next 20 years, we saw nearly 400,000 people leave the city.
I think that was part of systemic racism right there.
That's it.
Truly.
You put the nail. Thanks for putting the pin in it. Thanks for putting the pin in it, right? Because people were, a lot of people were like, no, not, I'm not gonna take part in that. So they picked up and they left the city. 400,000 people left the city of St. Louis. With a population, when the overall population drops, what happens in the schools? The population absolutely drops in the schools, right? But the people that were leaving were people who had kids and people who were going to have kids. They left, right? So between that time, right, and now, right, we lost nearly another 200,000 people, right? So at the last census, we were at 320,000 people. We also had more kids in our St. Louis City public school system. This next census is supposed to show the fact that we've lost more than 20,000 people across these last 10 years. What else has happened? We've lost more kids in our public school system. So now our public school, the kids that are in our St. Louis City public school system is somewhere around 20,000 kids. Think about it, 110,000 down to 20,000. What did I say when I started this? The system was built to house 120,000 kids. And we have 20,000 kids attending it. So when you hear the superintendent say, look, we need to have our resources be focused on educating the kids that are in these classrooms, right? So here's the next part of it. And the reason why we have to get the economics right in our community, and the reasons why we have to have economic prosperity across all groups across the city of St. Louis is this. The Harlem Children's Zone, when they built out the Harlem Children's Zone, they had the kids that attended those schools, right, that whole area, those schools, all of them underperforming. Those kids were coming in at the bottom of the standardized test in the state year over year. They built out the Harlem Children's Zone, and one of the things that they did, and everybody should take away from this, is that they had an incredible network of wraparound services to stabilize the households, to stabilize the families, to assure that kid, if that kid needed glasses, they had them. If the kid needed dental health because they had a toothache, they had it. right? If the family needed a bus ticket or whatever to be able to get to work, they had it. If family needed help putting together a job application, they had it, right? So it stabilized the families. And by stabilizing those families, right, the kid, when they went to school, learning could take root in that child because that child was able to learn now because all of those other social economic barriers were lifted off of those families. So when we look at the fact that, you know, hey, St. Louis public school system, like people say the kids, the St. Louis public school systems are at the bottom rung of some of these standardized tests across the state. And they look at it and say, that means the schools aren't doing the right thing. Here's the thing. We have to assure that the product, when it arrives at the school, that learning can take root in that child by addressing some of these social economic conditions within the community. And then they say, well, the whole reason all these things are upside down is because tax abatements and TIFs and stuff like that. Sure, we need to do some rehab on tax abatements and TIFs, but we're gonna have to, there needs to be some hardcore reality here also, because once you do that, you're not gonna see achievement automatically increase. Here are the facts. Sitting here right now, St. Louis Public Schools has a $104 million budget surplus. $104 million budget surplus right now today. They have a 36% emergency reserve fund. You know, I wish the city of St. Louis had a $104 million budget surplus and a 36% emergency reserve fund, right? But that's the reality. That's where we are now. So the school system is technically on sound financial footing. They have a 12-to-1 pupil-teacher ratio, right? 12-to-1. The average across the state is 14-to-1, right? Now, the other side of the coin is their costs for educating kids in our public school system is one of the highest costs for educating a child on a per child basis than any place across the state. Why? When you look at the conditions that these families are in, you look at the fact that if you go into any classroom in the city and you say, raise your hand if someone in your neighborhood was ever shot and killed, raise your hand if you had a family member shot and killed, raise your hand if you know, alcoholism or whatever has, you know, affected your family. Raise your, by the time you finish there, every child in that classroom has their hand raised. So all of these socioeconomic conditions, we should not lay at the feet of the St. Louis City Public Schools and say, you know what, you're not doing your job, because that's not true. Because by doing that, we're ignoring the facts that are in front of us. And if we actually wipe out every tax abatement, wipe out every TIF, oh yeah, and by the way, Town and Country, they're doing TIFs and tax abatements in Town and Country. South County Mall was built with a TIF. I mean, these are some of the hardcore reality. They're very unpopular talking points. But as the mayor, you're gonna have to work through those things and drive us to where we need to be ultimately.
Yeah, I want to switch topics, but I want to just give you a little twist on what you said, that when you start talking about our school system and kids not having hope, you have to give them hope or they're going to go to crime.
Yes.
If you want to know why, one reason why people move into a life of crime is because they have no hope of achievement.
Achieving, yes.
If you tell somebody, and think about this, I'm a middle-aged, or no, I'm not middle-aged anymore. I'm an old white guy, but the reality is I could have worked at a certain level and got and expected to be middle class irregardless.
Exactly.
You're a young African-American living in the city of St. Louis, especially in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You know that no matter what you do in life, the best you can get to is lower class. Why do I want to conform to this system? Why did I go to crime? Because I have no hope. So it's this whole process of, listen, through the school system, the Harlem type projects, we can move you out of that life to really achieve for middle class. People want to achieve better. You have to give them a pathway.
Exactly. So, Dave, and you thank you for hitting that pathway piece. You have to, everybody that's listening, they got to catch that. You have to give them a pathway. You can't automatically put a job in place and say, well, they can go over to McDonald's and get a job. It doesn't work that way, because here's the thing. You're talking about kids and populations that look at some of those things and say, that will work for somebody else. They will never allow me to have that, right? I can't, you know, all these things. So you have to give them the pathway. You have to say, okay, you know, you have to engage with them, have those wraparound services, connect them to it, and help them stay on that track for a little bit till it catches and they're off and running. And when you do that, you find, here's the thing, you look at all these kids across the city of St. Louis public schools. A lot of people think that they can't achieve. I'm telling you, they can, right? And I'm telling you that they can achieve better and more than any other kid across the state. But as the mayor, right, this is another important point. As the mayor of the city of St. Louis, it's absolutely essential that you have confidence in your school system, right? It's absolutely essential that you position these things in the right way and you tell the public that you can get a quality education in a St. Louis City public school. You can, right? And St. Louis City public school system are some of the best schools in the state, right? Here's the thing, because of the failures socially and economically that have gripped these children's lives, we cannot put it on the backs of the kids. We certainly cannot say it's the school's fault because they couldn't educate them, right? We as a community have to bring everybody up.
Yep. So, and I didn't mean to go back to that, but I mean, as I heard you talk the other evening, and I heard you talk again today, it's like, this is, you just said it at the end, this is a societal issue. So I'm being yelled at from the people behind that we don't have a lot more time, but I do want to get to one more topic, if you will, and we'll have to make this somewhat brief so we can go to wrap-ups. I'll remind everybody that if you haven't heard your question answered, please feel free to email at readforstlouis@gmail.com. So let's talk about something we didn't talk about the other evening. We have a White House now that is really talking about the environment. And I know for a lot of my brothers and sisters in the trades, when you start talking about green jobs, you get concerned that you're going to be talking about non-union jobs, or we're going to be losing good union jobs for the pipeline or for this or that. Could you talk to me about how you see a cleaner environment and what that means for quality labor jobs in conjunction with a greener environment?
David, bring it, you know, really capturing some of those jobs, some of those green jobs I think will be essential to the overall growth and development of the city of St. Louis. I think it will be a massive missed opportunity if we just, you know, turn a blind eye and aren't, you know, actively working to get those jobs. Here's why. A lot of things have changed in the city of St. Louis since it was founded, right? Since they came down the river and landed on, you know, Mississippi down here on the Cleves Landing area. You know, and you think about those changes, you know, landscapes have changed, you know, interstate highways have changed, all kinds of things. Our school system, the people live here all changed, right? But you know, one thing that hasn't changed, our location. We're still on the same place in the Mississippi, along the Mississippi, that made us the trade capital of this nation. One of our biggest assets that we overlook all the time. There's a reason why we have the second largest inland port in the country. We have, you know, interconnected railway system, more sophisticated than almost any place in the country, right? We have all these interconnected interstate highway systems now that you can get any place, you know, if you're going north, south, east, and west. It's the best location in the country for trade, right? For trade and also for green jobs. Trade and green jobs, one of the things that when we bring those jobs in, those jobs need to really be with skilled labor, right? With organized labor that can help assure that as those jobs come in, that people are able to have what they've one good job, right? Yep. That turns into a career. And if you don't have people advocating for them, the corporations are going to do what the corporations are supposed to do. Corporations are supposed to make highest amount of profit for the owners, right? That's what they do, right? So you really can't be mad at them because they are in it to maximize profit. Unless you have someone in there or some group in there educating them on the importance of paying people well, on the importance of having good, retirement plans and benefit plans in place for their employees, it's not a natural thing, right? So that's why so people can be assured that when we bring those things in and when we shift to more green jobs, there is a role to play for organized labor in that.
That's great. So as we're wrapping up here, because we truly just have a couple more minutes, why don't you take a minute to kind of summarize? I mean, you've said it so many times already during this call and on Wednesday. Tell my brothers and sisters in my union and in other unions, A, why they should vote for you, although I think you've done a great job of that already, but B, what they can do to help you in your campaign and why it's so important. And then I'll kind of do a final couple of words and thank everybody. But why don't you kind of wrap up a little bit for us?
Well, Dave, thank you. I want to say thank you to you and thank you for the people who are watching and people who have sent, emails, text messages, inboxes on our social media sites and everything. I just want to tell you all, thank you. Thank you for the support. And thank you for the kind words, right? When you run for these offices, and Dave, I'll tell you this real quickly. Years ago, when I first ran for mayor, right? The day of the election, it was snowing like crazy. It was good the day before, ice storm, snow the day of, right? So I'm standing at the polling place and a poll worker brings this older guy up. He's 80 or 90 years old, right? Former military and everything. And he was blind, right? And he touched me because you want to say, this is, you're President Reed. I said, yeah. He said, oh, thank God. He said, I came down here because I have to cast my vote for you. Now, here's the story. He was waiting at home for his daughter to take him to the polling place, and she never made it. He left his house and walked in all that ice and snow to get to the polling place to cast his vote. And I tell you, and when we weren't successful that night, I wasn't thinking about, the fact that we lost the race or anything like that. It just tore me up because I thought about that guy, right? Yeah. And I thought about what he hoped that we would achieve and the fact that we had, we weren't successful. So these things, we have an opportunity for some major change in the city of St. Louis. Everybody should know my record, right? When I commit to you to do something, we're going to do it, right? If you want to look at who has the best record in organized labor, well, I have 100% track record in organized labor. Yeah. So you can just check with it, and that's kind of important because, that should point to what's going to happen in the future. Right. But to get there, I'm going to need the support of organized labor. I'm going to need the support of people who aren't connected to organized laborers. I need support from the husbands, wives, and children of organized labor, right? You can do a whole lot of things. You can make a handful of calls. You can come volunteer to put literature out and things of that nature. And what should you hope to see in the future, right? You hope to see in the future some of the commitment that you've seen in the past from me. Right. So I have, as the president of the board, I have a front row seat to this office, and being the longest serving president of the board of Aldermen in history, I now have passed more ordinances than anyone in the history of the city of St. Louis, right? Affecting every aspect of your life. If it's pet care to bicycles, right? To public safety, I've touched it. And I know what it's going to take to turn this city around. I am the only candidate with the experience to walk into that office day one and get it moving. Other candidates are telling you these fairy tales, and some of those things they're talking about, I'm here to tell you as an expert in this field, some of those things they can't do. It's not going to happen. right? And legalizing prostitution should not be on anybody's list, especially considering the challenges we have here in the city of St. Louis. So I'm asking for the support and help from all your members. I'm asking for the support and help for anybody that's watching this, whether you're part of organized labor or not. You know that when I occupy that seat, when public safety and people go out and shoot people and murder people and carjack our seniors, the buck's gonna land on my desk and I'm gonna take ownership of it and I'm gonna address it directly.
Thank you so much, Louis. Thank you for all of our viewers this morning. Louis, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you on this venue. It's been an honor. You are absolutely the right candidate. I want to remind everybody listening, voting March 2nd. You can vote now. Voting is already open, early voting, so not too early to vote. You can learn more about President Reed at reedforstlouis.com, or you can call at 314-900-2002. You can tell your friends if they weren't able to watch this, they can share this. They can see this on Louis Reed's Facebook page or website. Once again, thank you, everybody. We are at our time limit. Thank you, President Reed. I soon wish to hope to call you Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Dave. And I certainly hope that happens. I'm going to be working morning, noon, and night. And want to tell my wife, love her, tell the kids, if they're out there, I'll be home soon. 4 weeks to go, and then we have 4 more weeks to the general election. So let's go and win this for everybody in the city of St. Louis. Thank you, St. Louis, for listening in.